Holy Spirit, breathe upon me. Allow your presence to fill this space. We elevate our hearts to you. Some individuals appear exceedingly holy within the church. They sing with great enthusiasm. They music, pray with fervor. They carry their Bibles with them at all times. Consequently, everyone perceives them as the ideal model. However, at times, music, those who seem the most virtuous are engaged in struggles that remain unseen. 3 girls, music, in this congregation were revered by all until one day an incident occurred, prompting the entire church to begin questioning. Music, remain with me until the conclusion of this narrative, for before it concludes, you may come to an important realization regarding judgment, music, and the individuals we believe we comprehend. This is a collection of African tales where the wisdom of Africa resides, music, and each story imparts a lesson. Sunday mornings in New Haven City were consistently vibrant with life. Vehicles lined the dusty roadside. Vendors offered meat pies and bottled beverages outside the church entrance. The air resonated with the sounds of drums, keyboards, and joyful singing flowing through the open doors of the Faith Restoration Assembly. Within the church, the atmosphere was electric. People clapped their hands. Voices soared in worship. Feet tapped against the tiled floor, and at the front of the choir platform stood Lisa. She held the microphone delicately, her eyes closed, her face slightly raised toward the ceiling lights. Her voice was clear and powerful, filling the church with warmth. Behind her were Kim and Ruth, adorned in identical white choir gowns, their Bibles resting on the music stand. The 3 girls had gained considerable recognition within the church. People admired them. Some even felt envious. They were consistently early for services, always respectful, and perpetually engaged in church activities. To many members, they epitomized the ideal representation of young Christian women. Lisa gradually raised her free hand as she led the next line of the song. Her voice softened, then rose again, guiding the congregation. The individuals seated in the pews closed their eyes as they joined in song. An elderly woman leaned towards her neighbor and whispered, "Observe that girl. Lisa sings as if heaven is listening." The woman beside her nodded in agreement. "And those girls she associates with, Kim and Ruth, are such well-mannered children." Towards the back of the church, a group of young ladies admired the choir. "They are earnest in their devotion to God," one of them remarked softly. "Indeed, very earnest," another responded. "It is rare to encounter girls like that in this day and age." In the front row sat Pastor David, his hands folded, observing the choir. His demeanor was serene yet contemplative. He had known those 3 girls longer than most in the congregation, enough to realize that life often conceals truths beneath beautiful facades. However, that morning, he chose to remain silent. The worship song concluded, and the congregation erupted in applause. Lisa lowered the microphone, offering a polite smile, while Kim and Ruth exchanged quick glances beside her. For a brief moment, they appeared to be ordinary young women relishing a pleasant church service. Following the sermon and closing prayer, the church gradually emptied. People congregated in small groups outside the building, conversing under the shade of mango trees. Children dashed across the sandy grounds. Lisa was the first to exit through the church doors, clutching her Bible against her chest. Kim trailed behind, adjusting the sleeve of her white dress. Ruth brought up the rear, as quiet as ever, her gaze fixed on the ground as she walked. Outside, the members greeted them warmly. "God bless you, girls," a woman said. "You led worship beautifully today." Lisa responded with a humble smile, "Thank you, Ma." A middle-aged man shook his head in admiration. "This generation still has good girls. Just look at them." The 3 girls strolled together towards the gate, sharing soft laughter. Kim playfully nudged Lisa. "You nearly turned the church into a concert today." Lisa chuckled. "It's called worship, madam." Ruth smiled faintly but remained silent. To any observer, they appeared to be typical church friends relishing a tranquil Sunday afternoon. Eventually, they arrived at the roadside. The church crowd dispersed as individuals entered vehicles or made their way toward adjacent streets. Kim extended her arms. "I am famished." You are perpetually famished, Lisa retorted. They exchanged another laugh. However, as they continued down the street away from the church premises, something about their demeanor gradually began to shift. The laughter diminished. Their footsteps became softer, almost contemplative. This is because Sunday afternoons inevitably transition into evenings, and evenings usher in a different reality. Nightfall descended gradually over New Haven City. Streetlights illuminated one by one. Melodies began to waft from nearby bars and lounges. Vehicles traversed the roads, their bright headlights slicing through the encroaching darkness. In a modest apartment on the second floor of an aging edifice, Lisa stood before a mirror. The white church dress had vanished. Her makeup bag lay open on the small wooden table. Kim was seated on the bed behind her, applying lipstick. Ruth was positioned near the window, quietly securing her hair. The room was hushed, save for the distant sounds of traffic outside. Kim shattered the silence. Tonight may be hectic. Lisa did not reply right away. She merely gazed at her reflection. Then she picked up an eyeliner pencil. We have no alternative, she murmured. Ruth turned from the window. Her voice was scarcely above a whisper. Do you believe anyone from church would ever venture to this part of town? Kim lightly scoffed. Churchgoers here? She shook her head. They are too preoccupied praying for sinners. Lisa finally diverted her gaze from the mirror. Her expression was serene, yet her eyes bore a weariness that was unrelated to fatigue. We simply do what we must. No one contested this, as each understood the reality encapsulated in those words. A few minutes later, the three girls exited the building and stepped into the illuminated city streets. Cars whizzed by, and music resonated from nearby clubs illuminated the road with vibrant neon lights. They were not engaged in dancing. They were not intoxicated. They were not acting recklessly, yet they were enduring. And endurance does not always appear virtuous. They treaded cautiously along the pavement, conversing softly as the night deepened. Suddenly, across the street, an individual halted. A church member, a middle-aged woman who attended Faith Restoration Assembly every Sunday. She had just exited a taxi. Her gaze froze as she observed the three girls beneath the streetlight. Lisa, Kim, Ruth, the same girls who had sung in church that morning. The woman's expression gradually tightened in shock. Her voice fell to a stunned whisper. Those girls. She glanced again to confirm. Then she shook her head in disbelief. Are these church girls or street girls? The rumor did not start with a loud bang. It began as most perilous rumors do, quietly, like smoke preceding a fire. By Monday morning, the woman who had spotted the girls on the street had already informed 2 individuals. By afternoon, those 2 had relayed the information to 4 more. By evening, the tale had gained momentum. Within Faith Restoration Assembly, whispers began to circulate through the hallways like an unseen breeze. Initially, it sounded like confusion. Then curiosity, followed by judgment. Someone mentioned they had seen those choir girls outside the previous night. Outside where? In that nightlife district near Silver Junction. Impossible. Yet curiosity is a formidable force. And gossip travels faster than the truth. By Tuesday evening, the Youth Fellowship WhatsApp group was abuzz with messages. One individual typed, "Please, is it true that Lisa, Kim, and Ruth were spotted around Silver Junction?" Another responded almost instantly. "I heard the same thing." A third message followed. Perhaps it was merely individuals who resembled them, but someone else wrote, "The person who saw them attends our church. She claims she is quite certain." The discussion erupted. Question marks, voice notes, opinions. Within hours, the entire youth fellowship had been informed of the story. By Wednesday, the rumors had reached the older members of the church. Women congregated after the midweek service, shaking their heads. "I always thought that Kim girls seemed suspicious," one woman remarked. Another woman sighed with great drama. "Nowadays, young people feign too much piety." A third woman leaned in closer. "They sing in the choir during the day and wander the streets at night." She clicked her tongue loudly. What a disgrace. Nearby, 2 men stood by the church gates discussing the situation. "I saw them leading worship just last Sunday," one man stated. The other man crossed his arms. That is why you must not trust appearances within the church office. Even the ushers have begun to whisper about hypocrisy, deception, and double lives. Words began to cling to the girl's name like thorns. However, none of those whispers knew the complete story, for truth seldom travels as swiftly as judgment. That same evening, in a small hospital ward across town, Lisa sat beside a narrow hospital bed. The fluorescent light hummed softly above her. On the bed lay her father, his breathing slow and irregular. Tubes sprawled across the blanket, linking him to a machine that blinked gently in the dim room. Lisa held his hand with care. Her eyes were weary, not from lack of sleep, but from a worry that never seemed to fade. A doctor stood at the foot of the bed, examining a clipboard. "The treatment is progressing slowly," he said in a calm tone. "However, the medication is costly." Lisa nodded quietly, already aware that the hospital bill was accumulating like a storm cloud. Each day added more burden. Every injection, every test, every additional night. Her father gazed at her with slight awareness. "Lisa," he said weakly. "I am here, Papa," she responded softly. "You should not be concerned about me like this," he murmured. She forced a small smile. "Just concentrate on getting better." Yet, within her chest, pressure was mounting because she understood the truth. Without financial resources, recovery becomes a challenging endeavor. Outside the hospital room, Lisa exited into the hallway and retrieved her phone. She noticed 2 missed calls from Kim and 1 message from Ruth. Typing swiftly, she inquired, "How is your mother today?" Ruth responded almost instantly. "Still searching for work?" Lisa asked. "Nothing yet," came Ruth's reply. Leaning against the wall, Lisa reflected on Ruth's family's plight, having lost everything months prior when their small shop was consumed by a market fire. The insurance had failed to cover the losses, and since that incident, survival had turned into a daily struggle. Although Ruth endeavored to remain resilient, there were moments when even faith felt burdensome. Another message pinged, this time from Kim, "Call me when you're free." Stepping outside the hospital, Lisa dialed Kim's number, and she answered right away. "Are you still at the hospital?" Kim inquired. "Yes," Lisa replied, and Kim sighed. "I spoke to the landlord again today, and he is granting Ruth's family an additional 2 weeks before eviction." Lisa briefly closed her eyes, feeling overwhelmed as life seemed to stack problems upon problems. "And what about that man?" Lisa asked cautiously. Kim's tone grew slightly firmer. "He hasn't ceased searching for her." This man had been a source of distress for Ruth for months, a wealthy older individual who believed that money could purchase anything, including people. Kim had intervened before the situation escalated further, and since then, she had been vigilant, like a guard dog safeguarding a friend. For sometimes, boldness is not synonymous with arrogance, it can also signify protection. Lisa exhaled slowly, and that evening, Kim grasped the unspoken question. "We go again," she said softly. Lisa nodded, even though Kim could not see her. "We go again." Later that night, the city's streets buzzed with life once more. Cars traversed the roads, and music wafted from distant clubs. Beneath the streetlight's glow, Lisa, Kim, and Ruth walked cautiously along the pavement. Laughter was absent tonight. They were focused and alert, akin to individuals who recognized that the world could be both benevolent and perilous simultaneously. Ruth kept her arms crossed over her chest, murmuring softly, "Sometimes I wonder if God is observing all of this." Lisa gazed at her with tenderness. "God observes everything," Kim remarked softly. "And he understands our purpose here." They proceeded with their walk, oblivious to the fact that someone nearby had already taken notice of them. A young man lingered by a parked car across the street. He had attended the Faith Restoration Assembly a couple of times with a friend. He instantly recognized their faces. His eyes widened slightly. He gradually raised his phone. The camera activated. Without moving closer, he zoomed in. The screen displayed 3 familiar faces illuminated by the streetlight. Choir girls, Bible bearers, Sunday worship leaders strolling through the nightlife streets. He recorded silently for 10 seconds, then 20 seconds, and finally 30 seconds. Afterward, he paused. He gazed at the video on his phone for a brief moment and smiled faintly, for in the era of social media, secrets seldom remain concealed. By morning, that video would start circulating within the church, among the youth fellowship group, and in private discussions, transforming the rumor that began as mere smoke into a raging fire. By the time Sunday arrived once more, the atmosphere within Faith Restoration Assembly had shifted. The same church that once welcomed Lisa, Kim, and Ruth with warm smiles now regarded them with suspicion. Whispers trailed behind them like shadows. Some individuals ceased their conversations as they walked by. Others openly stared, shaking their heads. The video had disseminated more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. Someone had shared it within the youth fellowship group. Another individual forwarded it to the general church WhatsApp platform. Before the girls even awoke that morning, the entire church had viewed the brief clip. 3 familiar faces under a streetlight. The same girls who sang in the choir, meandering slowly through the nightlife district. The caption someone added below exacerbated the situation. Are these the same church girls? By the time Lisa entered the church grounds that Sunday morning, she could already sense the shift in the atmosphere. The conversation ceased as she walked by. Eyes followed her in silence. Kim immediately took notice. She leaned in closer to Lisa while they made their way to the building. "Something is amiss," she whispered. Lisa remained silent, yet she had already surmised what had transpired. Ruth trailed behind them, gripping her Bible tightly. Her hands exhibited a slight tremor. Inside the church hall, the choir members occupied their usual places, but the ambience felt frigid. 2 girls, who typically greeted them with warmth, averted their gazes. A young man muttered something under his breath as they passed by. Kim turned abruptly. "What did you say?" The man met her gaze with confidence. "I said, some individuals enjoy pretending too much." Lisa gently placed her hand on Kim's arm. "Let it go," she advised softly. However, the tension in the room continued to escalate. Before the service commenced, one of the church ushers approached them discreetly. "Pastor David wishes to see you after the service." Lisa nodded with composure. "Very well." Yet, her stomach had already begun to knot. That morning's service felt longer than usual. Lisa did not lead the worship. Someone else had been designated for that role. No explanation was given, no announcement made, just a quiet substitution. While the congregation sang, Lisa sat silently between Kim and Ruth. She sensed the weight of their gazes, some filled with curiosity, others with judgment, and some with disappointment. By the time the final prayer concluded, the whispers had intensified once more. The usher returned. "The pastor is waiting." Inside the church office, several leaders had already assembled. The atmosphere felt oppressive. Pastor David was seated behind his desk, flanked by 2 elders. Another woman from the church leadership sat quietly, holding a tablet. Lisa, Kim, and Ruth stood near the entrance. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the room. Then, one of the elders cleared his throat. "Lisa," he began slowly, "we have observed something troubling." The woman with the tablet tapped the screen and then turned it toward them. The video commenced playing. Streetlights illuminated a night road, showcasing 3 girls walking, Lisa, Kim, and Ruth. Silence enveloped the room. The elder shook his head slowly. "You girls are members of the choir. You lead worship services. You pray within this church." He leaned forward slightly. "So, please explain to us why members of this church have been seen walking in nightlife areas." Kim crossed her arms. Her eyes flashed with anger. "You believe you already know the answer." The elder's voice became stern. "This is not the moment for arrogance." Another leader interjected sharply. "People are already discussing the church. Are you aware of the shame this brings?" The woman with a tablet sighed. "Young girls today pretend to be holy in church while living a different life outside." Ruth lowered her head, her eyes brimming with tears. Lisa sensed the tension in the room escalating. The same church that once celebrated them now regarded them as criminals. Finally, Pastor David spoke. His tone was calmer than the others. "Lisa," she looked up. "Tell us the truth." The room fell silent. For a brief moment, Lisa was at a loss for words. Then, suddenly, her voice broke. "My father is dying." The words lingered in the air. Everyone in the room froze. Lisa quickly wiped her eyes. "He has been hospitalized for months. The bills exceed what we can afford." She scanned the room slowly. "I have tried everything. Small jobs, cleaning houses, working during the day, but hospital bills do not wait." No one interrupted. Kim stepped forward slightly, and Ruth's family lost everything in that market fire months ago. She gently pointed toward Ruth. "They're about to be evicted from their home." Ruth quietly wiped the tears from her face. Then Lisa continued, "We did not go to the streets for enjoyment. We went there because survival sometimes compels you to enter places you never envisioned." Her voice trembled once more. "Yet every Sunday, we still attended church. We still prayed. We still believed that God had not forgotten us." The room remained silent. Even the elders ceased speaking. But Lisa was not done. She looked directly at them. "You all claim the church is a family. But when my father first fell ill," her voice faltered slightly. "I sought assistance from the church." Pastor David's eyes widened a bit, yet Lisa pressed on. "The welfare committee informed me that the church's budget was constrained, prompting me to cease my inquiries." A profound silence enveloped the room as the situation suddenly appeared altered. This was not merely a tale of defiant girls, it was a narrative of desperate individuals. Even Pastor David's demeanor shifted, for he was aware of something that the others were not. He had seen the request that Lisa submitted months prior. He had intended to follow up, but other issues had diverted his focus. Now, the repercussions of that silence confronted him, 3 young women striving to survive independently. The elder who had previously spoken reclined slowly, his voice lacking the earlier confidence. "You're saying," Lisa responded quietly, "we never ceased to believe in God. We simply exhausted our options." The room remained quiet. However, outside the office, a different scene was unfolding. Church members were already congregating in small clusters, phones in hand, rewatching the video, shaking their heads, condemning and judging. Inside the church walls, Lisa, Kim, and Ruth stood waiting, not for absolution, but for comprehension. For the first time, even Pastor David began to grasp a painful truth. The real issue in this narrative was not the girls. For several moments after Lisa concluded her remarks, the room was utterly silent. The elders who had previously spoken with such assurance now appeared uncertain. The woman with the tablet gradually lowered it. Even the atmosphere in the room felt heavier, as the story they had so readily accepted began to transform. Pastor David leaned back slightly in his chair, his hands clasped together as he regarded the 3 girls before him. For the first time since the meeting commenced, his voice softened. "How long?" he inquired quietly. "How long has this been occurring?" Lisa wiped her tears and replied candidly, 6 months. A small gasp escaped from one of the church leaders. 6 months, the elder repeated. Kim nodded. Yes. Her voice was less filled with anger now, yet it still held a certain strength. "We did not simply wake up one day and choose to leave in this manner." She gestured slightly towards Ruth. "Life compelled us to this point." Ruth had remained quiet for most of the meeting, but now she gradually lifted her head. Her voice quivered slightly as she spoke. "After our shop burned down, my family was left with nothing," she stated. "My mother has been attempting to sell vegetables by the roadside." She paused, swallowing hard, "But on some days we do not even earn enough for food." She glanced down at her hand. "I prayed every night for a change." No one interrupted her. "Sometimes," Ruth continued softly, "faith does not eliminate the storm. It merely assists you in standing within it." The room fell silent once more. One of the elders shifted uncomfortably. He had been the most vocal earlier. Now he avoided making direct eye contact with the girls. Kim spoke again regarding the man who had been bothering Ruth. The church leaders appeared perplexed. "What man?" one of them inquired. Kim's expression hardened. "A wealthy man who believes that money grants him the authority to control others. He has been pressuring Ruth for months." Ruth lowered her head again. Kim continued, "I intervened before the situation escalated. So if people see us in certain locations at night," she shrugged slightly, "sometimes we are protecting ourselves. Sometimes we are protecting one another. The ensuing silence was deeper this time. The narrative no longer resembled hypocrisy. It resembled survival. Lisa surveyed the room slowly. "We never cease believing in God," she stated. "Even on the streets, even during the most challenging nights." Her voice faltered again. "Do you understand what it feels like to sing worship on Sunday morning after spending Saturday night praying that your father does not die because you cannot afford his medication?" No one responded, because certain inquiries do not require responses. They merely require sincerity. Pastor David gradually rose from his seat. His expression revealed something uncommon for a church leader: regret. "I recall when you initially presented your father's situation to the church office," he spoke softly. Lisa gazed at him. "You remember?" "Yes," he answered. "I remember." He briefly lowered his gaze. "And I also recall instructing the welfare committee to evaluate the request." He hesitated, but I did not follow up. His tone became heavier. "I presume someone else would take care of it." An uncomfortable silence enveloped the room, for sometimes neglect is not overt. It can occur quietly, through delays, distractions, or the assumption that someone else will assume responsibility. Pastor David slowly turned towards the door of his office. Outside, faint voices could already be heard. Church members were gathering, whispering, and waiting to learn the outcome of the meeting. He turned back to the girls. "You three have borne a significant burden alone," he said slowly. Lisa remained silent, for sometimes an apology arrives too late. Pastor David inhaled deeply. "Gather the church leaders," he instructed one of the elders. "We are going to address the congregation." The elder appeared taken aback. Today. A few minutes later, the church hall was once again filled. Members sat quietly, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Pastor David stood at the pulpit, with the three girls positioned behind him. Some individuals in the crowd began to whisper again, while others crossed their arms, awaiting the outcome. Pastor David raised his hand to signal for silence. Then he spoke. "Today we all viewed a video." Mama spread throughout the room. "Yes," he continued. "We witnessed something that led many to judge hastily." He turned slightly towards Lisa and Kim. "But today, we are going to hear the complete story." For the next few minutes, the truth was revealed: the illness, the hospital expenses, the fire that devastated Ruth's family's business. The nights filled with fear, decisions made out of desperation. The atmosphere in the room gradually transformed. Faces that were once filled with anger now appeared uncertain. Some individuals bowed their heads, while others discreetly wiped away tears. The truth possesses a profound power. It strips away the ease of simple judgment. Pastor David concluded his address and stepped back. The church remained in silence. Eventually, an elderly woman rose slowly from her seat. Her voice quivered as she asked, "Child, why did you not come to us again?" Lisa replied softly, "Because the first time I did, no one came." That statement resonated more deeply than any sermon, and in that moment, the room grasped a painful reality. These girls had not been leading double lives, they had been carrying double burdens. Faith on Sundays, survival throughout the week, 2 battles, 1 hat. Pastor David returned to the pulpit for one final time. His tone was steady yet resolute. "Today, we have learned something significant." He surveyed the congregation. True resilience is not demonstrated by the volume of one's prayers, but is revealed in how we treat those who are struggling. He paused before proceeding. "And before anyone departs from this church today with the notion that they are superior to others, let this be remembered. The loudest voice in the church does not necessarily possess the most righteous heart." The room fell silent as that truth resonated with everyone, even those who had previously spoken the loudest. As individuals began to exit the church that afternoon, one question lingered in every mind, a question that would persist long after the gossip faded. Who is genuinely righteous? The one who appears holy or the one who struggles yet continues to believe? And thus, the story of Lisa, Kim, and Ruth circulated throughout the church. 3 girls who had once been celebrated as paragons of faith. 3 girls who had once been admired for their dedication. Yet, behind the white dresses, the Bibles, and the worship songs, there were struggles that remained unseen: illness, poverty, fear, and responsibilities that arrived too early in life. Like many individuals who bear heavy burdens in silence, they endeavored to endure without drawing attention. For several months, they engaged in prayer. For several months, they nurtured hope for change. However, when assistance failed to arrive, life compelled them to make choices they never envisioned. Yet, even during those challenging times, they continued to attend every Sunday, maintained their worship, upheld their beliefs, and endeavored to cling to their faith. This is what rendered the narrative so unsettling for numerous members of the church. Often, the individuals we judge most swiftly are those fighting the most arduous battles. Frequently, those who appear strong are the ones barely managing to keep their lives intact. Moreover, those who vocally advocate for righteousness may be the very ones who have lost sight of compassion. On that day, something shifted within Faith Restoration Assembly. Not merely because 3 girls were revealed, but because the church was compelled to reflect on itself. It was a reminder that faith is not validated by outward appearances. It is validated by our treatment of others when their lives become chaotic. Real life is seldom flawless. Individuals face struggles. They stumble. They make tough choices when the weight of survival surpasses that of reputation. The true measure of a community, particularly a church, lies in its response to those in distress. Do we rush to condemn, or do we seek to understand? Do we engage in gossip, or do we offer assistance? Do we distance ourselves from others, or do we draw them nearer? Lisa, Kim, and Ruth were never pretending to be flawless. They were merely striving to survive without forfeiting their faith. Ultimately, their narrative compelled everyone in the church to confront a disquieting truth. Holiness is not gauged by the volume of one's prayers. It is gauged by the extent of compassion one extends. For sometimes, those quietly positioned at the back of the room, whom everyone perceives as strong, are the ones silently pleading for help. At times, all that is required is a single individual who is prepared to listen prior to forming any judgments. Now, allow me to pose a question to you sincerely. If you were to encounter individuals such as Lisa, Kim, and Ruth within your own church, would your initial response be to pass judgment, or would you seek to comprehend their narratives first? Each story imparts a lesson. If this particular tale resonated with you in any manner, let it steer your heart and motivate your journey. I trust you found this African folktale enjoyable. Should that be the case, kindly subscribe to this channel for additional remarkable and transformative stories. Remember to like, share, and leave a comment. Furthermore, if you desire more content, the subsequent story is already poised for your viewing on the screen. Thank you for your attention. I value your presence. Until we meet again in the next video.